I'm going to be chatting about productivity and goal setting for a little bit today to bring in the new year. Chris is a friend of mine. He and I go way back, know each other through poker. When he got done with playing online poker, he actually still plays online poker sometimes, but a thing that he added to his online poker playing when online poker sort of slowed down a little bit in 2011 is productivity coaching. So he spent a long time as a poker player learning how to be productive and motivated. And as a poker player, you're like running a cell phone business where you do better if you can work out how to make yourself work for a long time and stay focused for a long time. And so a lot of poker players spend a good amount of time grappling with productivity and the like. And Chris was a poker coach, and he already knew a lot about productivity, and so he was like, oh, I could just do productivity coaching as well.
Hello, hello.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yep, I'm clear. How am I?
You sound pretty good on my end. Can you talk again so I can see how you are for the stream?
Talking again for the stream?
Yeah, I'm gonna turn you up a little bit if I can work out how.
I think I can turn up here too. I have a new microphone.
Okay, if you can turn up, I need you up like another 10 decibels, whatever that means. We'll work it out.
10 decibels, is that any change?
That's exactly the same on my end, actually. I'll turn you up here.
Okay.
I don't know how it's going through the client we're using exactly. How's it going? How's your whatever day it is? Tuesday.
So far, so good. Oh, that's why. Switching to the Yeti.
Whoa. Yes, you are now definitely on a much more professional microphone.
Yeah, I had it in front of me, but it was set to AirPods, so that'll be a little better.
And I think you're on the stream now as well. Cool. So, we did a like prep thing where we talked about what we're going to talk about today, and I'm trusting that you know what that is fairly well. And you're leading this, right? I don't have to do too much. I just introduced who you
Yeah,
were in general to the channel. Oh, filthy robots in chat. Hey, filthy.
nice. Yeah, I mean, you can moderate. I got plenty I could talk about, and you could steer me if you think needed, and I'll try to give a broad overview, and if you want to dive in deeper to anything, just redirect me.
For sure. Yeah, and I worked through chapter 1 of your forcing function workbook this morning, actually, so I have all sorts of things that I can talk about if you have
Cool.
need of it. Tell me about
Cool.
productivity, goal setting, and motivation.
Now, or is just it was a general instruction?
Yeah, just all of it now. Good.
Oh, am I live?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm live. So, hey guys, what's up? Should I introduce myself, or do
Go
I
for
just
it. Go
hop right
for it.
in? So my name is Chris Sparks. I know Steven through the wonderful game of poker, actually, which is pro poker player for a number of years. At one point, top 20 online players in the world. These days, I'm the founder of a company called The Forcing Function. So I work with entrepreneurs, investors, executives, anyone who's at the top and looking to get to the very top of their field. And I help them achieve what I call peak performance. So improving their productivity and helping them to perform at the highest possible level using their time most effectively, maximizing their focus, increasing their levels of energy. And the main methods that I go about doing that are setting up systems and habits. So figuring out what we want to do and putting things in place in order for those to happen more often and easier. And the critical component of all of that obviously is goals. um, how do you know how can you achieve anything if you don't know what you're looking to achieve, right? It seems obvious, but many people often skip this step of they expect certain results, but they never take the time to figure out where it is they're actually heading, right? It's like sprinting as fast as you can without having a direction in mind. And so this is where everything begins. I have a workbook that I put out this year. If you guys want to follow along with it, it's Experiment Without Limits. You can get a free copy of that at theforcingfunction.com/workbook.
It's
Um,
productivity, exclamation mark productivity in chat. Gives the link, I believe. I think I just put it in
yeah,
chat for everybody.
nice. So, I mean, chapter one of that workbook and chapter one of any discussion I have with anything is, what do you want? All right. That's the question that really drives everything is what do you want? And it's important to realize that we can achieve anything that we want to achieve if we have the right habits and systems in place. And so the question becomes almost a nested one. Think about Inception. Like, what do you want to want? Is that you can get yourself to want anything, and can get yourself to achieve anything. But first, you need to do that hard work of deciding what type of life do you want to lead. What do you consider success? What do you want to achieve? And so today, I would love to share some things that I have learned through working with some super successful people and lots of trial and error on my own end as far as what works to figure out what you want and get it down in a form that encourages you to take action on that.
Sweet. That's actually one of my goals right now. Because for the first time, I work through your chapter one again. I do it like every 3 to 6 months. I like reassess my goals and work out if I'm still going in the right direction. And for the first time since I started doing it, none of my primary goals were like work on myself. Like exercise, like I'm okay with my exercise diet. I'm okay with it. Like all of the stuff I'm like okay with. And so I'm like, whoa, what do I do now? So one of my goals at the moment is like be mindful and work out what's going on around me and what I see that I could be changing. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I would love to dig in on that if you're up for it. I think it might be instructional and useful. Um, so I think a common thing that happens with goal setting is that we decide we want what we already have right now, but just more of it, right? And that's where I love these prompts to kind of dig in and see, like, nothing is ever just okay. It's either like it could be doing better, or is it really worth the effort? Should I be working on something else? And so I think that every decision kind of zeroes in on a double down or stop completely, right? So you just say, okay, you said exercise is going well, you're eating pretty well, this sort of thing. Like, what's the next move? Like, if you wanted to grow in those areas, what is that next step? But then the question you ask yourself is, all right, what is that? Once you have that next milestone or level in mind, what's the effort required to get there? What would it take in order for me to reach that? And is that worth it, right? Is spending that amount of money or that amount of effort worthwhile to reach that goal? A big common one that I talk about in this chapter is this concept of opportunity cost, which, I mean, if I'm allowed to swear, this is like,
Go
it's a
for it.
total mind fuck, this concept. So opportunity cost means that what you are doing at this very moment, listening to my hopefully somewhat entertaining voice, comes at the expense of everything you could be doing right now, right? And so opportunity cost is the biggest cost. And so that at its bottom level is why goal setting is important, is because life is just this one giant buffet, and we are fat kids who want to eat everything. Everything looks so good, but we need to give up some things that we want in order to go after some things that we want more, right? And so goal setting is where we take a look at that buffet and say, all right, I can only try a couple of these things. Given that's true, what is the best thing for me to try, right? What is the highest impact, highest leverage things that I could be doing? And so I think I like what you said as far as you've reached a certain level on in areas of your life where previously maybe they were somewhat of a bottleneck, somewhat holding you back. And now you've gotten to the point where you feel confident in those areas. And now you're in the tough but enviable position of an unknown unknown is that something is holding you back and you're creating the space to
Yeah.
figure out what that
I'd
is.
say that um, the number of hours in the day are the thing that I've identified right now that's holding me back, and the way that I've found success leveraging that is like finding other people who can do things that don't necessarily need me to do them. You're here on the channel because I wanted to run a thing about goal setting, but I didn't want to prepare an hour-long presentation or learn everything. So I had you come on, would be an example. And more I'm finding that I can use the platform that I've created to let other people who are smarter than me in some area talk about that area instead of me trying to do the talking, like a little life hack.
It's a really big commonality amongst peak performers is that they don't try to be the best at everything, right? I tell this to business owners all the time is figure out the things that you do best and either eliminate or find someone else to do the things that you aren't really good at, right? So if it's something that you need to do, find someone else, hand it off, delegate it, especially if it's lower value. If it's something that you don't need to be doing, like don't do it anymore. And maximizing productivity, a lot of it comes down to knowing where you derive the most value and putting most of your resources into that bucket. What most people in the world think they don't have enough time, but really it's it's a misalignment of priorities, and that they say certain things are important, but they aren't necessarily their schedule doesn't necessarily indicate that those things are a priority for them, right? Everyone's priorities are different, right? I spend more time with my family. I want to pursue my hobbies. I want to grow my business. You should be able to look at your schedule at the end of the day. Say a third party who doesn't know you comes and looks at your schedule, and they should be able to tell what your priorities are based on where your time is going. And usually, when someone says that they don't have enough time, it just means that they're not spending time on the right things. And I think of this, I'll use an investment analogy as a rebalancing of your time portfolio is you see that the ways you're spending time aren't aligned with the things that you say are important. You just bring that right back into alignment. And that's a good segue into goal setting, right? Is how do you figure out what those things are that are important? And I'll give a high level overview of the process that I go through. I mean, we're at the beginning of the year. This timing is perfect for our new beginnings, and for me, this is when I do my annual review, when literally everything that I'm doing is up for just being thrown out, right? They all have to state their case that everything that I was doing, that this is something that makes sense, because my mindset is double down or stop. That case needs to be really good. And often this is the time of year that I stop doing things rather than add things on. It's a common tendency that we all have is we try to get ourselves to do more and more when really productivity comes from doing less but doing the right things. And so this is, what do I want to shed? What do I want to let go of so that I can put more energy, more focus into the things that are really driving happiness, that are really driving meaning, that are really driving growth. Um, so the first step in setting goals is, we'll think of this as just a brainstorm. Just throw things at the wall, anything that you could possibly want to do. We'll say this year. I have some prompts that I have in the workbook. So I'll just give kind of a example of those for listening home. I love, like, what would you attempt if you knew you could not fail? Um, what would you do if money was unnecessary? What do you want your obituary to say? If you were the last person on earth, what would you do? A few more. You can see the commonality of these is to get ourselves out of this bubble of what is practical, what is necessary, into I can do anything, because on a long enough time scale it's really true. And so thinking really big, and that forces us to start to address, like, which of these future lives do we want? What do we want to be working towards? And then everything is just working backwards from that. Once we have this North Star in mind, what's the next year look like in a person who's achieved these type of things? But the first step is just getting everything onto the page. What are all the things that we could want? And the critical things here are, what do you want your life story to be? What are your values? How do you want to live? And then I also like to think this idea of taking the outside view is, if you can always see, like, it's very easy to see how our friends are messing up and how they can improve, but it's very difficult to see that for ourselves sometimes. And so I love this exercise of, when possible, soliciting feedback from peers, but if not, being your own peer. Imagining that you're reading your own book, right? Someone is writing your autobiography and you're reading along, and say, well, why isn't he doing that yet, right? What's the obvious advice that someone else would be giving you? These are all ways to generate things that you could be doing, getting out of this mindset of, I want to just keep doing what I'm already doing, only better and more. It's like starting completely fresh. Um, so once you have this long list, here are all the things that would be really cool. Or, oh, okay, I want to become an Olympic ice skater. I want to, hitchhike across the Pan American Highway. I want to, uh, you know, think super super big. You look at that list and then you decide, all right, let's get reasonable now. Given I only have so much time, so many things I can be doing, let's start to whittle down this list. And so I introduced two frames that you can use to choose. The first, I already talked about, opportunity cost. Right, is like, what would you need to do in order to achieve it? What's the cost? How much do you have to spend in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of energy? What resources do you need? Thinking about, you can't do all of these things. What's required if you want to make this goal a reality? The other one, I know you love this one, Stephen. This is probably the most important concept that pro poker players talk about, is EV, or expected value. So
Oh, I was going to say tilt. Bluffing. Table
we
selection?
can
No.
Table
EV.
selections are a really big one. I think it's a similarity here, right? I always like to use the metaphor that, in life you can only play one table, so table selection is the most important thing, right? What you do for a living, who you work with, that's the biggest determining factor of, what type of life that you lead. And so choosing that table you sit down at, very, very important. Here with expected value, I have an exercise. It's a spreadsheet. If anyone wants to use, you can plug in your own numbers and try it out. It's at theforcingfunction.com/EVC. It's just a spreadsheet where you can fill in. And this is a exercise that I use for any major decision that I make. So I've used this for deciding, what city you want to move into, what career I want to try next. That's how Forcing Function started. What marketing channel I want to try. What type of exercise I want to do. It's very flexible, but the powerful part of this is it encourages you to decide what factors of this decision are actually important, right? What's the crux of this decision you're trying to make? Here, when we're talking about goals, what to pursue, you have these things you're trying to optimize for. How do each of these goals perform on those different values? And this helps you, overcome the apples to oranges type comparisons. And so in a poker sense, you maximize your EV when you have something that's very low risk, but potentially very high return, right? We call this asymmetric upside in investing. Is there's little or no cost in terms of opportunity cost to trying it. I love to talk in, the name of the book is Experiment Without Limits. You form an experiment where there's low cost to see, hey, is it makes sense to continue to double down here? But if it works out, the sky's the limit. And that this is a good way to determine, given limited resources, what's the highest leverage thing to be doing right now.
And you have how much time something's going to take upfront and ongoing, its difficulty, the excitement that you feel about it, its impact over 90 days and its impact over 25 years as the factors into in the expected value
Yeah.
calculation.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump into those briefly. So these are just placeholders. I mean, I encourage you guys to
Oh, but
use
we
whatever you
can.
find is important, but it's
That
a
makes
good
sense.
starting point. So obviously, time we talked about is like how ongoing. Like, is this going to be something you
Opportunity
spend
cost sort of thing,
spend?
yeah.
Can you do this for a week and then it's done, or is it I need to be spending 10 hours a week for the whole year? Right, it makes a big difference in terms of how what the actual cost is. How hard is it? And essentially, is like what are the chances of success? Excitement. If it's not something you enjoy doing, it's unlikely that you're going to stick with it. I mean, ask all the people you won't see again in the gym in 2 weeks. And then impact. Like, if this goes really well, how well could it go? And so, I use impact. This could be a broad sense, like who is impacted, what's the impact on your business, but essentially, whatever metric is important to you, if this goes well, how high is the ceiling? And so, these are the different factors that I look at a decision in, what option makes sense. And the interesting you'll find is not the total score at the end when you multiply these together, but that it reveals to you, the old joke, you flip a coin in the air to see which side you're rooting for, right? It's not, if you think you're indifferent, once the coin's in the air, all of a sudden you discover, oh, I really wanted option A, that's heads, and I'm rooting for heads. The same thing here. The score comes out, you say, oh, that doesn't make sense. I expected it to be number one. That's really revealing as far as your internal biases.
Mm-hmm.
So another added benefit of the exercise.
When
Um,
when the score is different from what you're expecting, do you typically identify that as the calculator being wrong or your biases being wrong? Or is it a judgment call every time?
in my experience, it means that I was biased towards one of the options. But I also use it as an opportunity to decide, to reevaluate my assumptions. Right. So if you can usually see it's like, okay, for this, let's say moving to a new city. So when I decided to move to New York, I did this exercise here, and I found out that not needing a car was the primary crux of the decision between moving here and SF. And so I was like, I feel like if I walk around versus drive, I'll be healthier and I'll do more things. But I don't really know. I've never lived anywhere that I could actually walk. And so what I did was I set up, all right, I'm going to go to New York for a week and I'm going to go to an SF for a week and see which I like best in terms of being able to walk versus not being able to walk. And it turned out that being able to walk was really, really important, and that factor trumped all the others.
Sure.
No. So it reveals the assumptions that you might need to dive into, find more information.
Makes a ton of sense. I think that increasingly in my life, I have opportunities to take advantage of other people doing things. And those are very different from the opportunities that I used to have, where there are lots of like judgments of whether someone's going to be able to follow through on what they say and how much time do I have to manage them for in a week. Like that time ongoing thing seems like it would be nothing if someone else was doing the work, but then sometimes that isn't true. It's Yeah, it's very interesting. Increasingly, my time is like I stream, which is something I have to do, and then I manage. That's my other hat. And I have people who do other stuff for me that can make a lot of value as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we could touch on there, but obviously that's the importance of working with the right people. If
Mm.
you're not sure that people are doing what they said they were going to do, no time is saved at all. I think we in the chapter about focus and attention, I use this concept of mental bandwidth, and I love this metaphor of your brain as a computer, where you open up Task Manager and you see all the different processes that are running, and all of these things that you have to keep in the back of your mind of, oh, Susan said that she was going to send this thing to me by Friday. Do I need to be checking in to make sure that she actually does it? That type of stuff. That's taking up a non-zero portion of your mental bandwidth that could be rededicated to something else. You add up enough of those, you get to the point that people feel like they're completely reactive and underwater all the time because they're responding to making sure that everyone else is doing what they said they would be doing.
Yeah, and like putting things in calendars and making lists were the two things that you set me up with that like I don't even think about that stuff anymore. It had better be in the calendar because otherwise I'm just not gonna remember it all.
Externalization, right?
Yeah,
Use the tools that we have. I like to say the brain is a poor storage device. So I don't remember anything. I have tools that remember for me. And I think if anyone listening to this, I think setting up my calendar was maybe the most important thing I did for, offloading my brain and maintaining attention, is that I don't need to know anything that I've committed to or anything that I've done. I could just check my calendar, and thus it's like I have this big weight and big source of stress that's been lifted, knowing that I'm not going to miss anything that I've committed to, not going to fail to show up because I'm going to get reminded at the right moment of what I've committed to. It's really
yeah.
powerful.
Let's talk about. I imagine that a lot of people looking at New Year's resolutions or looking at setting goals in general, it doesn't even have to have anything to do about the new year, are looking to try to create a new habit. And I know that I want to work on my evening routine this year. I feel like my morning routine's really solid. I feel like my routines for getting started at the stream and ending the stream are really solid. And those are the three routines that I have set up that are working for me. I feel like my evening routine where I wind down and I feel like I'm missing some task in there that sort of unwinds my brain every night. So I want to explore that. But I would love for you to sort of talk about routines and how you can sort of hijack habits that you already have to add on new things that you want to get done over the course of a day because I think that's a really cool and powerful thing.
Yeah, of course. Um, so high level, uh, why routines are important is that they are a container or a collection of habits. And so once you have a routine, and so you mentioned a morning routine. So common things in morning routine, you wake up and exercise or read or journal or meditate, these types of things. And rather than needing to maintain each of these habits separately, you're able to chain them together. And so that one habit becomes the trigger, one habit just flows into the next. And so they mutually self reinforce. So that's the power of chunking habits together into a routine, is that if you get yourself to start the routine, you can get yourself to finish very easily. And it's a way to keep yourself going on many different habits at once as far as packaging them together. um, and so, yeah, I always recommend people starting with the morning routine first, because you win the first hour, you win the day. It's how you build momentum, and generally, the morning is the easiest time to complete a habit because the day gets more complicated as it goes on. And so, why an evening routine is really important, and is also one that I see a lot of people struggle with, is because sleep is cultivated. There's a lot of talk about sleep these days and how important it is, and how many of us are found lacking. And the most critical components for getting good sleep are consistency of bedtimes, consistency of wake times, consistency of meal times. And so having routines around those takes you 90% of the way to getting good sleep. It's really, and I know this being, professional poker player, where sometimes I'm up till 5 a.m.
Yep.
and sometimes I need to be up at 8 a.m. And those days aren't necessarily far apart from each other. And so not having that consistent sleep schedule, you really pay a cost. But if you can get yourself to the point that you're winding down and falling asleep around the same point every night, keeps your circadian rhythm in motion, and it goes a long way for your body, kind of takes care of the rest. um, I mentioned meal times too. This is something that a lot of people don't know. Is it's if you eat too close to going to bed, your body uses a lot of energy metabolizing. That's a big source of having a hard time falling asleep, but also elevated heart rate, which means you don't get into the deep sleep. The other one is and I probably this is probably an important one for this audience. The really big impact for me is waking up and immediately getting outside and getting some sunshine. Especially this time of year, it can be tough. And so you can simulate that. There's artificial sun, things that simulate the sun that you can have when you buy your computer in the morning. But getting that sun first thing in the morning like signals the body is like historically that's what we did, right? We're still 10,000-year-old machines. Is we woke up with the sun and we went to bed when the sun went down. And so that's what the body's used to. And the closer we can recalibrate our own rhythms to match that, the better we'll be off. And so when I'm thinking about the bedtime routine, essentially, the 45 minutes to an hour before you go to bed is unplugging, unwinding. So having a hard cutoff for screens, hard cutoff for meals, hard cutoff for alcohol, super hard cutoff for caffeine. Those come a little bit earlier in the day, but thinking about when in the day you're going to be stopping those different things. Um, and then for that last 45 minutes, when you're unplugged away from your devices, like not thinking about the past, not thinking about the future, right? This is not where you start thinking about what your to-do list
Hmm.
is for the next day. This is not where you start, coming up with ideas for your business. It's like getting away. I like reading fiction. I like taking a bath. I like just relaxing with
So
friends.
it's not
Yeah.
necessarily mindfulness. It's like serendipity.
Yeah, I think of presence. I think serendipity could be good. I know people who meditate or journal before bed and find that really effective
I do
for
that in the
quieting the
morning.
mind.
I can't do that
Yeah,
at night. It doesn't wind me down properly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's all an experiment.
I wanted to share. So my favorite game rule ever is in Connect Four. You're not allowed to put a piece halfway up a column, and they don't bother putting it in the rule book because it's obvious. Like if you drop the piece, it goes to the bottom because like gravity makes it go to the bottom, right? It has to. You don't even need to set that rule. So for me, getting outside in the morning and getting a walk in, getting to see the sun, stuff like that, I just don't keep breakfast food in my house.
Yep.
So I'm hungry when I wake up, and then I like walk to a cafe. It was This is something that I could never do before at all. And then like that was the change that did it. It had nothing to do really with like motivating myself or researching or anything. I just made it so I had to go outside to eat for breakfast.
I mean, there's a lot of really critical best practices that are built into that simple adjustment there. Is I mean, the first being that we can make ourselves do anything if we nudge ourselves or create the right environment in order to do so, right? It's like, well, we're going to want to eat, and so if we need to leave the apartment in order to eat, then we're going to leave the apartment. And so that's much easier than using the willpower or trying to force ourselves to do something, is that we create a natural incentive. And so thinking about that, you have that nice reward, right? Eating is a reward, taking a bath or a shower is a reward, talking to a friend's a reward. All these things that we're constantly doing, but we don't use them to reinforce what we actually want to do. And so you get yourself to go outside, and then you get that sweet reward of having something tasty for breakfast. And you can get yourself to do a lot of things if you just restructure these rewards. And everything works in reverse, right? So you had this as a good habit, which I track, my days 1 through 10, and you would not believe that was the biggest correlation with did I have a good day or did I have a bad day, was did I go outside? And embarrassingly, the answer was no quite a bit before I figured that out. And then I set up something similar to you to make sure that I had to. I work from an office, which I have to walk to. And so it's like, if I'm going to do work, I have to go to the office. But the same works the opposite in reverse: is you want to eat healthier, only have healthy food at home. And so if you want to eat unhealthy food, then you have to leave and go do it, versus having the food that's right there, low friction, easy to prepare. It's like just we make the things that we want to do easier to do, and the things we don't want to do harder to do. And that's why I come back to everything's an experiment. Is if we're curious about ourselves, right? We never fail. We just collect data. Like, oh wow, that's really interesting that I, sat on the couch all weekend and ate chips and binged Netflix. Well, what was the situation that was created that became the default behavior, right? And you start to observe yourself and identify those conditions. And once you depersonalize it, you can make changes to your environment so that the future version of yourself behaves in a different manner. It's like I
Yeah.
don't get myself to do anything. I make the things that I want to do easier to do in the future. It's very different.
Yeah, and there have been times in my life where I have sat down with a spreadsheet every day and tracked exactly what I did every 30 minutes when I've like really wanted to drill into that. But more recently, just having the Oura ring that you recommended for me has done wonders for like tracking my sleep and my exercise, and I don't have to think about it at all either. It just like comes up on my phone when I want to check like how have I been sleeping? Did I exercise yesterday?
Yeah.
Um
I
yeah.
recommend everyone tracks where their time is going at a certain point because the results are guaranteed to surprise you. It's like you would not believe the way that we're spending time in a day until you actually track it. And I think it's a big part of goals as well. And if we wanted to touch on SMART goals briefly, that's one of the really key components is that knowing what you want but making it measurable so that you know if you're making progress on it or not. And I could just summarize it as thus as you improve what you measure. And all you need to do to improve something is measure it. Like you don't need to change anything else. Like you want to lose weight, just write down how much you weigh every day, and you don't need to change anything else. You'll automatically be attuned to opportunities to change. Yeah, measurement and the ability to measure what you want is really critical.
Yes, that's restructuring goals about like networking and online spaces and stuff like that into something that I can measure is complex. Also, in online spaces, you get measurements shoved down your throat, which aren't good. Um, Viewer number, follower number, hours streamed, like none of these are particularly good metrics. And so I've had to like be honest with myself about what I actually want and whether those are useful to me or not. And that's been an interesting thing to work through for me.
Do you want to try to write that out as a SMART goal? Might be a good demonstration for the audience.
A SMART goal, um, so working out what metric I care about. Oh, are we? Which one are we doing exactly? Are we doing like networking in an online space as a SMART goal?
Yeah, I mean, we might need to define it a bit, but as far as something that you might want to do this year, how can we convert it into something that, is
Okay.
smart?
Well, I mean, this goes big for me because going all the way back to what I want in life in general, um, my general goal is to understand as well as I can what's going on in the world and help people around me understand it too and make good decisions in the world to make the world better. Um, and it has a selfish component to it because I want to be surrounded by people who are, you know, doing healthy things and being happy. But it also has a like very high inspiring sense of altruism for me. I don't know how it comes off to other people, but for me it feels like I'm serving some higher purpose, which is something that I've lacked in my life before. So that makes it really easy for me to get up in the morning. I never have to struggle with the question of like, do I want to do this today, because I know that that's at the end for me. And so for me, working through this networking thing is channeling through wanting to spend a year working on climate stuff. So finding out what different charities there are working on different climate causes, working out this January, we're talking about productivity and stuff because when we find out that a goal should be to plant 1 million trees, we want to know how to do that and how to reach that goal. Um, that's how I'm doing that. And so I've been reaching out to people from different charities who know a ton of stuff about climate who are interested in the online space and trying to work with them. I have a spreadsheet where every month I have a different issue, and I have like, do I have a guest speaker yet? Who am I chatting with? I have an employee who does a lot of that for me, and I check in with her um, a lot. And yeah, the one thing that I would say that I don't have in that space is a sensible daily progress measurement. That's something that's hard to establish. I can measure like cold calling people. I can say I want to send a message to one person a day. And I know if I measure that and if I do it, I will succeed. I'm going to be a lot of people who say no, but a lot of people will eventually say yes as well. But that feels like a hack. It doesn't feel like it's actually measuring what I care about. It feels like it's measuring what I can measure. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, there's definitely some definition that would be useful there. And, because it's an experiment in its early stages, treating it as a provisional, this might be the thing, and I'm going to try for a month and see if it is, and kind of narrow down. I'd be curious as far as, what's an ideal outcome for you 12 months from now that you could say. So, starting off with specificity, right? What what would have happened, December 31st, and you would say that was successful as far as, yeah, I'll just cut it off there.
Oh my gosh. If I haven't gotten death threats, it's like number one. Nothing so uncomfortable happens that I have to move. Um, Number two, if I've successfully like made three connections that are going to be valuable for me going forward, like this is an organization that I can work with that will do really cool things, teach me and my audience really cool things. If I've taught my audience some things, like if people in my community are volunteering somewhere or getting out to vote or something like that because of what I've done, seeing some of that happening would be really cool. And I think the very beginning of this in the other direction, like we talked about the far away direction, but the sitting here right now thing is like me looking at climate and not really understanding what I'm meant to do and how I should change the decisions I make in my life based on what's going to happen in 30 years. Because it's hard for me to tell. And so a big thing for me would be having more clarity on that. Being able to say, like, if I start a family, what's the chance that my kids are going to have fresh water? I would like to have a vague idea what the number is for that. And so that would be another big one for me.
So it's multi-pronged, which is the challenge, and it seems like the beginning is deciding, which of the approaches you want to focus on. Maybe so rewarding seems pretty clear, but maybe it's worth, reiterating. And so you touched on before, surrounding yourself with people who are making things happen, getting others to volunteer, helping people in the world understand what's going on and take action. Like, why is that rewarding and meaningful for you?
Is it rewarding and meaningful for me? Well, I talk to these people every day. They can talk to me about things which are exciting to listen to. I think that the thing that I struggle with most in like my mid 20s was an like an angst. Like I was a poker player, I could make lots of money playing poker, I was really good at it, I made the money, and then I had no idea what to do. It was clear that I didn't need this much money, and I didn't want to play poker more when I had the money in my bank account. And I was like, I traveled a bit, I hung out with friends, I bought a bicycle and biked a lot, but I felt very like purposeless in a higher sense. And so I think the idea that I'm achieving that is what's most important to me. The thing that the big reward for me as a streamer that makes me very happy chemical is when I get like the private email just from someone reaching out saying like, "Hey, I just want to say I've been going through a tough time and your content really helped me through it." Or sometimes people will say, "Hey, you made me rethink how I was approaching something in my life." And even if they don't like specify what it is, they just say like, "And like coming away from what you said on stream, I felt like I was doing it better," and stuff like that does the happy chemicals for me. I don't know if does that do the happy chemicals for everybody. Must, right? Some extent.
It's feedback. I think, self-actualization, seeing that what we're doing is having an impact, that we're not shouting into the void, that is resonating with others. I think that's natural. I thought what you said earlier around purpose, with the way to measure and track it on a day-to-day basis of how easy it is to get out of bed in the morning. I think there's definitely something there, as far as, if you have, this is something that I've experienced. If you have a few days in a row where it's really tough to get out of bed, it's probably symptomatic of something deeper going on, that you're not working on the right thing, or you're stuck in some way. And so that's something that I keep an eye on, is how excited I am to get out of the bed in the morning. Is like just a day to day, am I working on the right things? um,
Yeah, I get frustrated that it's not time to get out of bed in the morning. Like I feel very purposeful and very happy in what I've ended up doing, and I'm glad. Like I spent 2 or 3 years of my life looking for something that would make me happy, and I think that this is a good thing for me.
Yeah, leaning into
So
that.
it's working.
Um, and I like, as far as measurable. So we're going kind of out of order down the list. SMART, M for measurable. A few things that you talked about that might be good things to track. And as you said, they might not be the things you want to optimize for, but are signals that you're on the right track. Is and like, you have the spreadsheet of, here the charities I might want to work with. So how many of those have you been in touch with? And that could be overall or in the last month. I like that, tracking who people that you've helped or impacted in some way, as that's a good sample size of who's being affected by what you're doing, what you're saying, and that only a small subset are going to reach out. But if that number is going up or down, it's kind of indicative of the overall population, and a sign that you're doing things that matter. Um, and I would kind of, I like volunteers inspired, limiting that down a bit, if that's an avenue you wanted to go, as far as taking action on this, because it's a giant problem, and who knows where to start. Is that not only people have changed their understanding there, but have taken action that they might not have otherwise. um,
I feel like volunteers is the wrong word. I want people to. I don't necessarily need people to find this goal, but I would like people to come to my community and find a goal from my community. So they don't have to volunteer. They might go to school or they might get a new job or something. I don't mind, but if people find purpose, I guess, which is maybe something that you can track with people volunteering, but that's more the deeper thing that I'm looking for, I think.
mhm. And so time based, will we would just be putting a deadline on that, or let's try this for a certain amount of time and then check in on it. But creating some urgency, right? When is this goal going to be achieved? I think the tough one here with this goal for you is, it's always best if a goal is actionable, right? So this is a step that many people skip. Is, someone has a goal of, oh, I want to have written a book, or I want to make $1 million, or I want to be 6% body fat. But those are results, and a lot of those results are out of someone's control. Particularly, some of your goals are dependent on other people taking action, which is someone out of
Yes.
your control. And
Yes,
so
so often.
finding something that you can do and track, which is an input for you, something that you specifically are doing. right? So writing a book becomes sitting down to write for a certain amount of time every day. 6% body fat is going to the gym for 1 hour for 3 times a week, right? Converting into what is the input that's going to lead to that result. That's always the last step
Yeah. I
with
was
these
thinking,
goals.
I was wondering if this could fit into the evening routine that I'm trying to build actually. I was wondering if um something I could try to do here is to chat with somebody on the phone or on voice call on my computer or something for 15 minutes every evening. And like not the same person every night, but like somebody who I think might share goals with me, who I might be able to collaborate with in some way. Somebody from a charity, somebody who's another streamer who wants to do this too, something like that. I thought, one, I lack one on one social time with people other than my partner who I'm in a relationship with, because I sit here and talk to 1,000 people at once instead. And um, two, I have this space in my evening where I feel ready to wind down my day and like summarize what's happened and put a stop on it, but I feel like that's a shared thing almost. So I was thinking that maybe trying to schedule calls for myself would be an actionable way to do this.
It's certainly a forcing function to move this forward, as you know there's a big collaboration component to what you're doing, and just having to schedule a call ensures progress in some way and that you have something to talk about.
Yeah, but probably not one every day. One a week? I don't know.
Specificity helps. You know, like like Monday, Wednesday, Friday is better than 3 times a week, for example. So if you
Sure.
want to go once a week, choosing the default day, that type of stuff helps. Time wise, I think I have about 10 minutes left. So
Yeah,
I wasn't
let's
sure if you wanted to
do
hand it out to Q&A.
let's do a little bit of Q&A. I think that would be lovely. Um were there good questions? I would like to do 15 minutes of one-on-one every day. Think of it maybe once a week, a month, maybe a year. Yeah, yeah, I know. I talked myself out of that goal pretty quickly, didn't I? I'm also an introvert, so gosh. Sometimes I think the reason my sleep is bad is that I just want to be awake in the middle of the night when nobody else is like alive, because there's too many people in what I do. Uh, does anybody? Do I have some people that I consider equals or I look up to? Is this directed at me or at Chris? I'll say for me, definitely. I think I might be one of the best people in terms of playing Slay the Spire, and maybe I'm the best person at playing Slay the Spire while entertaining people at the same time or something. But I don't even try to be the best person at other things. I try to find out who the best people at other things are and get in touch with them if I need help, which is why Chris is here. Definitely. A lot of really cool people in the world. Do you have thoughts on that one, Chris?
Yeah, I do think it's always better to learn through someone else's experience, whether that's a conversation or reading it in a book. I I don't like this whole idea of you need a mentor, is like this, Yoda type figure who's old and wise and is going to lay out the path, because he lived in a very different world and had very different priorities. This mythical Yoda mentor figure. But for me, I'm always trying to look for others who are on a similar journey to me. So mathematically, I like to say, as I look at the slope, the x rather than the
Yeah,
y-intercept,
that's a really
is
powerful concept, I think.
yeah, it's not someone who's already made it and is in the ivory tower, but someone who's on a very strong trajectory and has similar goals to me. And I'm looking for people to team up with and collaborate where we can get there together. Um, is it's both very useful to amplify each other's efforts and to um, help cover each other's weaknesses, and that you can do a little bit more of what you find strong and vice versa. But also someone who can give you feedback and illuminate your blind spots, I think is really invaluable. And the closer that their goals and experience are to your own, the better that advice and feedback will be. So yeah, there's no one out there who I'm like, oh, I want this person's life, which is kind of the prerequisite for taking advice from anyone. But more is like, these are people who I really respect and I like the way they do things, and I'm actively looking to deepen those relationships and find opportunities to collaborate.
Yeah, cool. I thought this was a good question. Do you have thoughts about goal setting for somebody who has executive dysfunction slash depression? If if your brain unit isn't working well, how do you get past that to try to set these goals and form habits that make sense? My thought is like psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, counselor, mental health professional.
Yeah, I I had very positive experiences with the right therapist. I love the modalities of cognitive behavioral therapy as well as internal systems, internal family systems, IFS. So check those out. The book Feeling Good, highly recommend that. That kind of lays out the CBT model in a book that you can follow without paying for a session. It's when you go to the sessions, it's essentially they lead you through those exercises. Um,
What was the name?
yeah,
Sorry, one more time.
Feeling
Feeling good.
Good by
Feeling good.
David Burns. Um, yeah, I'm far from an expert on depression, but I have worked with a couple clients who've had periods of depression, and what I found tends to work is what I call bringing up the floor. And so rather than going for 10 out of 10, shooting for getting a slightly higher score than you had the day before. I think the optimal is that we're at 7 out of 10 every day. But if you're at a 1 today or this week, how can you get yourself to a 2? How can you get yourself to a 3? It's just what's the next, wherever you're at, reset to 0 and get to that next level. Um, I also love this one. Some of you guys who are on Reddit might be familiar with this. The concept of no 0 days is you just have to do something. Is you make the bar impossibly low that you cannot say no to it. All right. So if you're feeling bad because you want to do 100 push-ups every day and you haven't done your 100 push-ups, now your new goal is 1. And then okay, you do 1 today, and then the next day is all right, you have to do at least 2. But the key is that you never put down a 0 for the day. That 1 is always better than 0. And as long as you're making the tiniest of improvements every day, you can dig yourself out of any hole.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think that's a really something that I've found really powerful is just acknowledge where you are, wherever that is, and just find a way to take a step forward. And the tiniest of steps forward compound, and they grow very, very quickly.
It took me a while as a streamer and as a poker player, I think, to be comfortable with days where I wasn't at my best. And then eventually I just realized I'm like a human being, and sometimes my brain's not gonna be great today or whatever. But if I do my best every day, given what I have, even if I have a 5 out of 10 day, it's better than nothing. And yeah, putting that behind me, like just being happy with whatever happens, has made me a much happier person.
Yeah, you
Um,
mentioned you mentioned tilt earlier. Thinking about life as one giant session where the results of any given day don't matter at all. And if you have a bad day, who cares? Close the container, get to bed early, figure out how you can wake up the next day and have a slightly better day. That's all it is. And where things go awry is we think that what's happening poorly right now is a reflection of how things are going to go for the rest of our lives, which is ridiculous. And so that's all I say is like find a way to reset to 0, and that you set yourself up for to do things a little bit better the next day. That's all it is.
have quite a few questions, I would say, about burnout. People who are teachers who love their job but get exhausted. Um, that sort of idea. You have thoughts about how somebody who is required to work a certain amount, they can't work less, and loves what they do, but they're just like being asked to do enough that they're exhausted. What can you do to fix that or mitigate it?
Oof, that's a tough one. Well, I key in on the word energy. And so something that I try to be sensitive to, and I think is a good exercise as well, is both tracking your energy levels throughout the day. Seeing when your energy levels are the highest and the lowest, as well as what are the activities that give you energy rather versus take away energy. Um, and so, if you know, for example, that you have very high energy early in the day, or for some people it could be later in the day, trying whenever possible to do your hardest, most energy draining activities during those periods of time, whenever possible. Um, Also, if you know the things that give you energy, trying to position those ahead of time so that you have the most capacity, the most energy available that you can. So, if you find that exercise gives you energy, try to find a way to do it in the morning. If you tires it you out afterwards, maybe waiting till later. And just doing everything you can to make sure you have all the resources available. And so that that chapter on energy, I really hone in on sleep, diet, exercise, and to a lesser extent management of caffeine. And I think those are the four levers that account for vast majority of your energy capacity, which you have available. And so I would try to dial those in first. So make sure you're getting enough sleep, make sure you're eating foods that you feel good afterwards, make sure that you're moving and getting outside every day. That'll at least put you in the best position to deal with things incoming. And then wherever possible, if you have tasks or people who drain energy, looking for ways to limit that exposure.
Oh yeah,
So
the
it's
coworker.
it's difficult when, right, you work in a corporate environment or report to a boss, and your autonomy is limited. You have certain things you need to do, but the way you can generally structure the order of things in a way that matches your own levels. So just looking for those opportunities, and really it just begins with tracking.
For sure, yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me. I know that Caitlin has a job very much like this, and she just comes home at night and is exhausted and spends her evening like knitting and watching a show because that's as much as she wants to do. And yeah, I've like sat down with her and like thought up some things that we can try to do to help her get through that, but sometimes you just have a job that's a lot of work even if you love it, I think.
There's a way you can plan around that, right? If you know you have a full draining day coming up, scheduling time in advance to recover afterwards goes a long way. So I know on my days where I have a lot of calls, I'm introverted, it drains me a lot. I try not to schedule anything after those so I have time to recharge.
Sure, makes a lot of sense. We have done our hour. Before I let you go, I want to say again for people who weren't here, this is Chris Sparks. He's a friend of mine from way back playing poker 10 years ago or more, who now does productivity coaching as well as still competing in high stakes poker. You're still at the tables, yeah. Um, and all of the stuff we've been talking about pretty much is in his free workbook, which you can find on his website at the forcing function. You just need a name and an email address, and it's there for you to work through with exercises and guiding and everything. And Chris's job is, if you work through that workbook and you think, wow, this was really useful and interesting, and I feel like I could get even more out of it if I had Chris's individual expertise guiding me through some of the things that were a little bit tricky, that's where you hire Chris, and that's how he makes his money doing this, which I think is pretty cool. I think it's a cool job.
Gets me out of bed in the morning, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I would plug the next steps for anyone who is interested in continuing this and looking for opportunities to improve themselves. So yeah, free copy of Experiment Without Limits, my workbook where I walk through all my best practices that I use with clients, can be downloaded for free. That's at theforcingfunction.com/workbook. I also have what I call the performance assessment, where with a lot of this stuff, it's difficult to know where to begin if you want to improve your own productivity and performance. And so this is a free quiz where if you take it, it'll reveal what your biggest opportunity is to improve yourself. And so that's theforcingfunction.com/assessment. In addition, some of the topics we talked about today, so goals, systems, habits, and routines. I have some free chapters of my second book online on my website. Name of the book's Inflection Point, so it can be found at theforcingfunction.com/inflection point, dash in between those. And yeah, if anything I said today resonated, would love to hear from you. I'm on all the usual social media channels at Sparks and Marks.
Awesome. Especially on Medium. Chris has quite a few pretty sweet articles on Medium. There's a 100 products for productivity that he recommends article that was like incredible for me. I just like bought a whole bunch of them. It's awesome. Yeah. Thanks for joining me, Chris. This has been awesome. I'll let you go. Get on with your day and chat if you want to chat with me for a little bit about what we've talked about. I am down to do my best. Thanks for having thanks for coming on, Chris.
This was a lot of fun. Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, we'd love to do this again too. This was really cool.
All right, awesome. See ya. Okay. So okay, sorry about that. Just wanted to say bye to Chris probably. All right. Yeah, I should have like switched to a different scene or something, but I didn't. Okay. I thought that was a lot of fun. So, general outline of what we said, I would say like the big hits were that working out what you want in life and setting goals to achieve that in small chunks is very important. I thought the thing about like sprinting but not going in any particular direction was a comical and powerful metaphor for what happens if you don't do that. Recognizing that you only have so much life, and if you set a goal and work towards it, you can get it, but you can't do everything. So working out what's important to you and what gets you out of bed in the morning. We talked a little bit about routines and habits, which are a very powerful way to tap into those goals. I saw a question about wanting to brush teeth more, and the way that I learned to brush teeth was to like get in a position to brush my teeth more often. So like every time I shower, if I haven't brushed my teeth, I brush my teeth and I take my toothbrush into the shower with me, for example. But yeah, there are lots of ways that you can sort of cleverly hijack things you already do and make it so that something that's more difficult for you to do is a part of that. And so we talked about getting outside in the morning. Chris and I both work jobs where we don't necessarily have to do that, but we've both found ways to force ourselves to do it because we both recognize that it makes our day a lot better. We talked about SMART goals, the SMART acronym, which if you look at the workbook, you'll be able to work out what that means. Measurable, actionable, something reinforcing. I don't remember. But in Chris's workbook, he has all sorts of ways to break apart a goal and refine it and work out exactly specificity is the S, right? Exactly what the right way to do it all is. I'm glad you found that informative, Falky. It was a fun thing to do. He is tracking. Oh, what's M then? Not measuring. Feel more motivated to actually do things. That's good. And I would say make sure that you take that motivation right now and you create something solid. Like it could be a calendar entry that says, I'm going to go work out in 3 hours or something. Or you could call somebody right now and have a conversation and say, hey, I miss you. We should talk more often or something like that. Take the motivation that you feel right now and take it out of your brain and put it somewhere where it's a permanent thing. And I did use the calendar example very deliberately because, like, when I want to do something, the first thing I do is put it in my calendar. It's so much harder for me to, like, be like, okay, I need to make a doctor's appointment, so I'm going to, like, call the doctor right now. For me, it's very easy. It's very low friction to look at my calendar, see, like, oh, yeah, I have this time free. Put a thing in the calendar right there. I'm going to make doctor's appointments right now. And then when I come to that time, I know that I have enough energy to do it. I'm like planning to be doing that later in the day sort of thing. Just take the motivation and put it into something that will do something later. What was the name of the ring I'm using? It's an Oura ring. Put that in chat. Oura ring. How about right-sizing your level of ambition and goal? You decided to forego significant money and level of accomplishment to reduce stress, increase peace, and sanity. I think that if you identify that the things that have to be done to make money in your life with what you want to do are not worth it, then you don't have to make that much money. I don't think there's anything wrong at all with that. Don't know if it was touched on, but it's probably healthy to analyze negative habits too. The stream has made me reflect and I've realized I spend far too much time on Reddit and Facebook reading about politics that make my heart hurt. Plaguebird, I think that's what you get out of measuring your time. If you sit down and you, just for a day, honestly, have a spreadsheet open, you're noting every 30 minutes what you did for the last 30 minutes and how it made you feel, you will very rapidly there's sort of a different experience, I think, looking at the data measured that tells you that you've done this with your day. It's a different experience versus actually doing it with your day. And that's something that I still come back to regularly. When I find that I've been on Twitter too much recently, for example, to convince myself of that fact. Like, even if I know it somewhere in my head, I don't really feel the same level of conviction about it as I do when I sit down with a spreadsheet and I'm like, oh, I like checked Twitter 3 times this hour and I just didn't need to do that. It didn't make me happy and it wasn't worth my time. And so once I do that, I come up with a strategy like, okay, I'm gonna do part of my morning routine is gonna be catching up with social media, and that's when I'll do it. And I won't be plugged into it for the rest of the day, sort of thing, would be one way that I found a solution to that in my own life. See ya, Gen Fizzes. Do I feel external pressures, family or politics? External pressures. I would say that rather than thinking about pressures that I feel in my life, I think about... Chris talked a lot about like table selection, like you only get to sit at one table in life. So I think about the table that I'm sat at, and I think I try to be unbiased and honest about what it is. So Like, my family might not be the best family in the entire world, but I know what my family is, and like I I function with the knowledge that my family is that, and with the understanding that it can do certain things and can't do other things. I'm having dinner with my mother tonight, actually, which is going to be really sweet. Um, I like in setting up this climate year that I'm doing right now. I feel like angst at the idea that the world is facing all sorts of climate change issues. But rather than letting that defeat me and make me feel bad, I try to recognize that like that is just what life is right now. And all I can really do with my life is try to make the best out of it. And so I don't spend a lot of time thinking about whether I'm pressured by these things. I try to think about what they are, like measure them, identify them, learn about them, and then I try to think about how to make the best out of them that I can. How do I go about making these spreadsheets? What I usually do is I have 30-minute chunks for the day. Now, obviously, for some of it, you're going to be sleeping, so you just write sleep or whatever. And then I have, I usually do, I change it up every time a little bit, but I usually have a column for how happy I am, how fulfilled I am, and how productive I am. And I do a 1 to 5 rating for those three things. Um, so if I spent, oh, actually, this is an example that I've talked about before in becoming a streamer. I had like a job that was like okay. So I'd say like I was productive 4 out of 5, but I wasn't enjoying it. So happiness like 2 out of 5. Um, while I was doing this job. And then after my job, I'd go play video games and talk to people about them. And that was like enjoyment 5. But for me, I felt like my productivity for that time was like a 1 out of 5. Like I wasn't working toward a college degree, I wasn't making money, etc. The friendships I had with the people I was playing games with weren't what felt like super permanent friendships. It was like, yeah, we play games together online, but we don't do that much more than that. And so for me, I looked at that and I was like, okay, so there's obviously this problem where I think that what productive means is like doing a job and making money. But I think that what enjoyment is like playing games and hanging out with people. And then I was like, oh shit, if I could do both of those at the same time, I could just be 5 out of 5 for everything. And I ended up trying to do streaming. And for a while, streaming was just a hobby and it was just a way to feel like my gaming time was more productive. And then eventually I got to a point where this was just like my full-time job and I got to leave college and stop doing the job that I was doing and I could just do this. And that was a huge success for me in my adult life. One of the largest successes. And it just came from measuring what I was doing and recognizing that there was just disconnect with what I wanted and how I was spending my time. Would I be okay with showing you the spreadsheet? I don't have like one spreadsheet. This is like these are very temporary things for me. I'll just make a spreadsheet. I probably don't even bother giving it a title, and I'll just write down what I did for a day or two. I do a college degree after I was done with poker. I left college in my senior year to play poker, and then I went back a few years later, and then I left college I guess in my senior year again. I was like going for a master's in statistics the second time, but I never got an undergrad degree. I've done some graduate level statistics and almost enough undergraduate stuff to have an undergrad degree in classical studies, but I don't actually have a degree of anything. All right. I took statistics courses in college and forgot everything. Probably come back if you jump on Khan Academy or something like that. Do some classes. Statistics is something that you can do practically too. Like you can do some descriptive statistics for fun of some sort. Okay. I think I'm going to This has been a ton of fun, but I think I'm going to wind the stream down for today. I'm going to have dinner with my mother in a bit, so I'm going to go easy on myself. And there are a couple of other things that I have to do before tomorrow as well.